Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, member Edmund Burke shares his path from a non-target school in the Southeast U.S. to breaking into an investment analyst role at a $3 billion family office straight out of undergrad through a church program. Learn why he transitioned out of that role, how he helped add value to a legal firm for their ultra high net worth clients, and then was able to successfully pivot to a venture capital role. Enjoy. All right, Edmund Burke, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Patrick, thanks for having me on.
So it'd be great if you could give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest on a small farm and attended a non-target school in the Southeast. It was medium-sized, not a great business program. Didn't really want to stay in the Southeast, and so I moved up to the Northeast after I did a fifth year there and landed a analyst position at a multifamily office and transitioned into private wealth management after that. And now I've been at a strategic venture capital firm for about a year now.
Very interesting background. So let's go all the way back to kind of your upbringing. You're kind of on a farm. Why go to a school in the Southeast from the Midwest?
Yeah, so family ties from the beginning. My father, he was a day trader while also kind of tending our property, and my mother was an attorney. But a lot of family ties to this school in the Southeast. I actually wanted to go to West Point and didn't get in, and so that was kind of my backup.
Got it.
So I had a lot of fun there.
So you went to school there. Did you know you wanted to be in the business program, or were you always thinking because your dad does like that day trading stuff? Did he kind of encourage you to push you down that path, or how did you end up kind of interested in finance?
Yeah, so having the upbringing that I did with both my parents, I was obviously interested in both policy and finance. So I actually did a dual degree program, 2 undergraduate degrees, one in public policy and the other in finance. And so, yeah, growing up with my parents and my dad kind of talking about the markets, that's kind of what drove my interest towards finance.
But did you have like specific internships during your undergrad that kind of set you up, or did you know a lot about did you know about investment banking, or did you know kind of the direction to go? I mean, to end up in the Northeast at a family office seems kind of like a tough first job out of school, really. So how did you even, was it something you were targeting to be on the buy side right away, or were you kind of thinking, oh, I need to go be a trader, or, sales and trading desk, or I need to go do investment banking? What was the thought process there?
Yeah, so actually, I had no clue. I don't have a lot of finance family members. All my family members are military or in the legal field. And so I actually started using Wall Street Oasis in college to look at kind of the different industries within finance. Like I said, my program at my school wasn't the best. Our career management center wasn't the best either. And so actually, I had no clue about internships or anything like that. I worked at camps and worked on a ranch up in Montana one summer. So I don't regret it. But through research, I kind of knew I wanted to be on the buy side in investment banking, but really no practical experience. So I was really looking as far as post-grad jobs for things that would just give me a broad exposure to all the different kind of sectors within finance.
So tell me a little bit about how you had, I think, one finance oriented internship, right, during your undergrad?
Yeah, exactly. And that was actually the summer after I graduated. So
the summer after you graduated, you tell me about that. Were you like, I have no job, what's going on? Like, what am I doing? Or what was the progress? Or as you started learning more and thinking, oh man, I should have had some internships, what did you do as you kind of approached graduation, in case there's any listeners out there in a similar boat right now, just graduating, since we're in that graduation week?
Yeah, definitely. The school I went to, strong social network, especially being in the Southeast. So I leveraged that a lot. Attended a lot of our MBA career events at our school. So met employers that way.
That's smart. Hmm.
But ultimately didn't really want to end up in the Southeast. And so I actually applied to a program up in the Northeast through a church. It was kind of a leadership program. And that was a year long. And that's how I landed my first kind of real position in finance.
Were they paying you like right out of school, like at that internship?
Yes, it was 3 or 4 days a week, and it was a paid kind of rotational analyst program.
How did you kind of pay for? Did the parents help right when you graduated for the move up northeast, or were you able to kind of string together enough for food and rent?
Yeah, it's an interesting program. It's through a church, so you actually work for the church a couple of days, and then they help you land these internships. They're all across the U.S. and with different churches. And so I actually lived with a family, a church family for that year, which was definitely the weirdest part. Being 22-year-old guy moving to a different city, living with family. But that's how that worked.
That is odd. Yeah, I've never heard of that. That's cool. So it's can kind of be a nice transition out of college though too. You have a little bit of support. So especially if you're far away from family. So you basically got up there. They helped you land an internship, and then tell me, you were only there for what, 5 months or so?
So I was promoted actually midway through. It was a fairly small multifamily office. It was a year-long rotational program.
Hmm.
So multifamily office, we had several wealthy families in the Northeast region, but we also had some institutional clients, some endowments and pensions.
Before
Um,
going into that, how did you even that you landed that role specifically through the church?
Yeah. So just through some clubs in college, I played up my finance experience with investments and things like that.
Hmm.
I did some study abroad over in Europe and focused a lot on economics and played that stuff up. Really just selling my experience for more than it was, if we're being honest.
And that's for to land the initial investment analyst role. And so like, did you feel like you were completely lost because you were doing due diligence on alternative investment managers, on private credits, right? And for this multifamily office, what did you feel like? Were you completely lost in Excel, or did you feel like you had just enough to get by?
Luckily, I think I had enough basics. Working 3 or 4 days a week, I had time to ramp up. They understood that I was, in a learning position.
Yep.
Um, but really, I mean, just deep dives on the job as far as hard skills, Excel, different systems, and things like that go. Bloomberg terminals. It was all just, staying a little later and kind of studying and brushing up on things after the office closed.
I'm surprised that was enough. Like, was there anybody there that was helping you out, or was it a really small office?
Relatively medium-sized office. We have several. They had several offices across the kind of northeast, southeast region.
Hmm.
But there's some other guys that had done this program before me and had stayed on full time afterwards, and so they understood my position and they were a huge resource for me.
So, like, and what would they do? They sit you down and teach you how to model, or just like show you how to look at different investment opportunities, or how to like.
Yeah, a lot of they were my go-to guys for questions. They encouraged me to speak up. If I was lost, not to not turn my wheels too much. And so it was a good experience as far as learning kind of on my own, but having those guys that I could kind of turn to whenever I was just completely lost.
How much of the job was like sourcing deals, and how much was like pure execution of like maybe the more senior members were bringing in deals? How would I think about that?
Yeah, so we had an investment team across two offices, and so that's how we source deals.
Hmm.
Um, Also through some of the families who just had connections in that way. Really, the benefit of a multifamily office is just being able to pull all that money in together for larger buy-ins for different funds. So my personal role was a lot of pitch decks and things like that, doing due diligence on managers and specific funds and products.
So it
So a
started
lot of
off as part-time, you said, like 3, 4 days a week? And
yeah.
did it scale? Like, what were your hours, like doing 8-hour days, 10-hour days? And then when you went when did you kind of go full time? And do you mind kind of sharing a range of pay of what it was like when first job out of school, how that compared to like a banking job?
Oh yeah, hourly is probably equivalent to around 50, 60K a year.
Hmm.
Um, it ramped up halfway through the year as they kind of gave me a promotion. I started working more hours. They gave more hours to me, but it was a year-long program. I thought about staying on afterwards,
Hmm.
and we had a lot of discussions about that, but ultimately made the decision that I didn't really want to be a portfolio manager or an advisor to wealthy families. So that's how I made my first transition.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that. So you kind of were thinking, hey, I don't want to work in this family office for the rest of my life, be an advisor and or do deals just for them. So what did you start looking into? How did you kind of think about your next step?
So I leveraged my alternative investments experience. The thing with the multifamily office is they did a lot of risk adjustment. That was kind of their main thing. But we're 5-10% of these families' portfolios were in alternatives, whether it was private equity funds or hedge funds.
Hmm.
So they had a lot of local connections within the area. They were gracious enough to introduce me and to give me recs to a lot of them. But knowing that it was a year-long internship, I definitely scrambled and was interviewing just as much as I could across my city. Actually took
When
some
did you kind of
interviews out
start?
on the West Coast.
When did you start doing that? I mean, it sounds like you were there for a little bit over a year. Is that correct? In
I mean, a year, 3, 4 months, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
So
So you knew you kind of the clock was ticking, right? It's basically.
exactly,
And so
exactly.
when did you start kind of actively interviewing, and tell me a little bit about that process and what types of firms were you interviewing with and stuff like that?
Yeah. So my soft stop date was kind of the beginning of the summer, but I talked to them and they let me stay on through the summer. They had another intern kind of coming in taking my role
Hmm.
in I think September or October that year. So that was my hard deadline. So I mean I started 3 or 4 months out of when I anticipated kind of taking a new job, and then luckily I kind of extended that through the summer in order to interview at kind of all the different places.
Cool. And so tell me a little bit about that process. So you were getting intros through their network, which was helpful. Did you know you wanted to go venture capital for sure? Were you interviewing at corporate finance positions? What other stuff were you looking at?
So I knew kind of getting out of wealth management was my goal. Definitely was interested in alternative investments, interested in the private equity space. So that was what I was gunning for, which was very difficult with my educational background and very low level of experience. And so ended up actually interviewing at Carlisle and some other big name shops, kind of in their internal fund accounting roles, things like that, just to give me hard skills. Looked at some other hedge funds, things like that, just through the connections with the family office. Mostly, fund accounting roles and just hard kind of investment analyst roles. Figured I needed to get more experience on my resume, so that's kind of how I went about it. But was focused on the alternative investment space for sure.
Got it. So tell me how that, like, what were the interviews like? Were they super tough? Did you feel like it took you a while to ramp up, or how were you prepping for those?
Online resources, honestly, just studying different websites, just really understanding the lingo is definitely a part of it. Just doing your basic financial statement analysis questions, things like that, things that pertain to alternative investments. Knowing that lingo was huge. The interviews themselves were probably 60-70% technical, 30-40% fit,
A lot.
just depending on the size of the shop.
That's high. So tell me, like, were there specific um, firms, not you have to name the firms, but specific firms like private equity that you felt like were harder or easier versus like, VC?
So yeah, definitely. I mean, the hedge fund and private equity shops, you obviously have to have your technicals down, but really they just want to see how you think through problems. So, a lot of brain teasers, things like that. They want to see your wit. They want to see that you can be agile in different situations. So, did do some case studies. I interviewed at some other family offices and investment roles there. So, here's
So,
a portfolio. How would you adjust it? Kind of stuff.
and so, where did you end up? What was that next jump?
So I actually landed at another kind of advisory firm just for a short couple months. It was I had an offer out in Seattle actually,
Mm-hmm.
but knew I wanted to stay in the city that I'm currently in, and so ended up just taking the one offer that I had. I actually interviewed there a couple times, three rounds or so, and when I started, the people I interviewed with, one of my boss or the person I was going to be working with had quit like the day before, and so
Oh man.
I walked in to just a storm of stuff. They were asking me to write down how tos, on my first day because I would be training the next person that came in, and so it was not a great situation. So actually ended up because I interviewed at so many places. Some of those interviews were kind of ongoing while I started that job, and
Mm-hmm.
so finished up a couple of rounds at some other firms, and that's how I ended up kind of in ultra high net worth advisory. So paid a lot better.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So, ultra high net worth advisory. Talk to me a little bit about what that job entailed day to day. When you say pay a lot better, were you getting closer to like 80,000 at this point? Or what? When you say pay a lot better, what was the range?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of their tax advisory
Mm,
firm.
yep.
It was a large law firm actually, so it was their tax advisory kind
Got
of
it.
arm
Practice.
of a
Yep.
huge kind of top 25 law firm in
Okay.
the U.S. And so 20 to 30 ultra net worth family clients who have their own family offices or even VC funds themselves, and so dealing with a bunch of kind of CPAs and lawyers, they needed a guy that could kind of talk the financial lingo and kind of talk to these family offices and basically be a liaison for them. So that's how I landed that role. Was again just through being able to speak the language, and some of my back office experience at the multifamily office was a huge plus for them, and just knowing different financial systems is someone that they needed. So
So like day to day, what would you be doing there?
So actually, I onboarded a financial kind of portfolio management system,
Mm,
and so these attorneys and CPAs, they had to go through the financial advisors in order to get all of the investment information. And so doing tax advisory, you have to have the whole picture.
yep.
Real estate, life insurance, plus investments, and everything in between. And so a lot of times these families have 3 or 4 different banks that their money is at, and so actually onboarded this system to kind of consolidate all that information into one place and actually develop some estate planning models in order to give our clients kind of a live picture of what their estate is, how much money their kids would get, depending on the sway of the market. A lot of our clients were, executives in Fortune 20 companies, and so a lot of their net worth was tied up in a single stock, which was the company they were an executive at, and so their net worth would swing a ton. So
Yeah.
this system was huge for them.
Awesome. Awesome. So, how long did that take you to get set up? I mean, it sounds like, were you just like, did you actually help decide which one to go forward with and stuff like that? Or were you just like, they had decided and you just helped implement it to get everyone connected, get everything connected?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the ways I landed the job was because I was familiar with the systems that they were looking at.
Got it.
So I did help them decide and I did do some contract negotiation because it
Yep.
was a fintech firm that their clients were multifamily offices and private wealth firms, and so
Got
a
it.
law firm was different for them. So
Got it. Cool. Okay. Tell me a little bit about kind of your next step then. So you were there for a little over a year, correct?
yeah,
Tell me
so
about when you started looking, why you were looking, stuff like that. So just people can get a sense of, when they should start looking.
yeah, so landing at this law firm, I knew it was kind of a temporary move for me. It was more so to get out of the situation that I was in.
Mm.
The pay was great. Law firms pay hourly, and so I had a great base of around 80K, but I got paid every time, and so that was huge.
Nice. Yeah, it's a big difference.
Yeah, so knew I wanted to be in the alternative investment space. Again, looking at VC firms, PE firms in the area. I kind of gave myself an ultimatum that I'd either go back to business school or I'd get a different job. And so luckily I just passively through recruiters in my city, and just through different kind of industry events, things like that. Again, through kind of multifamily office connections, just interviewed at places my employer didn't know at the time. And so that's kind of how I landed my VC analyst role. Started looking. I was looking probably for 4 or 5 months until I finally landed it.
Did you have any other offers along the way that you turned down, or was it more like you were just in a lot of discussions with a lot of different types of firms?
Yeah, a lot of again, kind of private wealth management roles, analyst
Okay.
roles, investment analyst roles, portfolio management, and I turned those down just because I was in a comfortable position, so I was able to be a little more picky.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of were in a good spot, so you're really looking for something more on like the investment side. Is
Exactly.
that fair? So, tell me a little bit about the interview process for VC. Was this the only VC kind of fund you interviewed at, or were there others? What was that like? Were they testing like were you investing for direct investment roles, or more like the support analytics roles? You know, portfolio company management type stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about how you kind of positioned yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're looking for a pre-MBA kind of associate role. My firm is fairly specific. They're a strategic investor, so we do direct investments. It being strategic, it's smaller investments,
Mm.
and so they're looking for someone with some modeling experience, but really kind of a blank slate. They had some people move internally from kind of their fund management side of the shop to the internal accounting side. So
Mhm.
they're looking to fill those positions. So really, it's just kind of a luck of the draw. The opportunity came up. They're looking for someone that they could teach and grow, and so came in. Did a lot of studying. Honestly, VC wasn't really what I was gunning for. Looking for more PE, but in my city, there's just more VC firms in the
That's fair.
area.
And
So
so how did you even I mean, what were the interviews like? Were they like quizzing you on like unit economics, cases? And then talk to me a little bit about what it was like when you first started. Was it, the most of the work portfolio work and the types of analyses you were doing? I think it's interesting to people to hear kind of what that's like.
yeah, definitely. So they're a pretty open firm. I mean, all firms kind of say that they're horizontal and not vertical, but this firm, since they're strategic, we do a lot of technology investments. So the majority of the firm is actually engineers, scientists, people that can vet the technology, and so their investment side of the shop is smaller. So it's a smaller team, and so they we're looking for someone that could do pre-deal due diligence, have a basic understanding of what makes a business tick, what makes a good investment.
Mhm.
So had a little bit of that just from my private wealth experience, kind of knowing what to look for in an investment.
Did you have to like prepare? Like, were you ready to talk about specific deals you had done at at your previous firms? Were you ready? Like, I should say, did you structure your resume in such a way that was like the typical investment banking resume where you had like transaction experience and you listed that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I played up my alternative investment experience,
Right.
played up my relationships with kind of the other funds and other managers that these families had connections with.
Cool.
Played that up a ton.
Smart. And then so when they would drill you on those, you would talk about it as if you were an investor. So like when you got there, how much of the work were you doing? Was it like portfolio work, getting on the call, like doing meetings with portfolio companies, or was it more like taking the data that was coming out of the portfolio companies and trying to like, get it together for management to review?
So both. The size of my firm, they definitely needed both.
Hmm.
We have hundreds of portfolio companies,
Hmm.
which is a little above average for your average VC,
Yeah.
and so they really needed and still really need,
Systems.
management, being able to look at the different portfolio companies and their where they're at and their financing, things like that.
Hmm.
But still did some due diligence. I do due diligence currently, but we have a couple of guys that are extremely experienced in that. and so they lead. So a lot of my role is kind of on the post deal management side of things.
How do you think about like your future and the skills you're developing now that you're there?
Yeah. So again, as I said earlier, I was looking at either kind of getting a job that I was actually interested in, or
Mhm.
going and getting my MBA. I never really anticipated being in VC, but as I've been in the industry for about a year now, it's definitely grabbed my attention, and it's something that I could consider doing long term. I get bored easily, and so having different portfolio companies kind of come across your board, being able to look at different deal structures and things like that. Super dynamic, and you're learning something new every time there's a deal struck.
Did you feel like there were certain areas where you were weak or that you needed a lot of work on? And can you just like specify where those were and kind of how you've improved?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, VC is another world. That's honestly one of the reasons I kind of did an AMA on Wall Street Oasis. There's not a ton of information on VC.
Hmm.
VC is kind of a niche area depending on the strategy of the firm. So, I mean, public equities, even private equity, things like that, there's tons of information on, really easy to talk about. But with venture capital, you're dealing with cap tables and, different capitalization structures. There's a ton of legal speak in there. So the vocabulary was definitely super difficult to get my head around. It's probably the steepest learning curve I've had for any transition, for sure.
Yeah, we need to release a venture capital course on Wall Street Oasis at some point. I think we're working on it, trying to find the right instructors.
Definitely.
So if you know anybody, let me know. Anyways, anything else you'd like to share before we call it, like in terms of advice you'd give to people who are kind of in a similar boat? Maybe they're at a non-target, maybe they're not really sure what their first step should be. Kind of looking back on kind of your path. Any advice you'd give?
Yeah, kind of as a young college student, I thought that networking, you kind of had to have a purpose, and so I would encourage people kind of in that boat to always be networking. I had a professor tell us that strangers have what you want in life, and I
Strangers
think
have
that's
what? What's that?
have what you want in life.
Yeah.
And so you have to be willing to reach out, and take a coffee chat. Reach out to people. Don't be afraid. Even if I've had jobs come up, opportunities come up 6, 9 months later, from a talk that I had that I just took. So use your
Yeah.
network, build it, keep an Excel spreadsheet of all your contacts and where they work.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's funny. I got an email yesterday from just a random listener of the Monkey to Millions podcast. I mentor 3 college students trying to break into careers in finance, and he referenced one of my pieces of advice to Grace because she was like, she was networking, but she was networking with like alums and this, and I was like, just network with anybody with investment banking background. Like, you don't have to limit yourself; just get scale. And he had written me. He's like, well, this strategy. He's like, how do you do that? Because it doesn't feel like there's a connection. He had kind of pressed me on that, and basically, I wrote back this long email saying, doesn't matter if there's a connection. You make any sort of weak connection, it does not matter. A lot of people just like helping younger people. So if you're shy, and it's even better if you're shy, because if you're shy, it means you have more to work on to get better. So like the more calls you take, the less shy you'll become, the more confident you'll become in telling your story, the better you'll be at interviewing. So there's just so many additional benefits from just building your network. Um, and so I just was trying to get that across that, let's say you spend an hour every day sending out 50 connection requests. That's like what, 18,000 requests in a year. Let's say only 3,000 of them accept your connection and only 300 of them take a call. That's almost a call every single day
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
year. So like if you do that, your network becomes incredibly strong. And I can almost guarantee that one of those connections will have a dramatic career impact on you one way or another, whether it's not that year, maybe it's 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. It's having those connections, having those conversations will teach you so much as well. So something that people like to think, oh, that's just, it's too aggressive or it's too whatnot. I mean, as long as you're polite, as long as you're respectful of their time, and as long as you show a genuine interest of what they're telling you, and you're not just asking these basically memorized questions that you're giving to everybody, and you're listening to what they're saying and actually trying to learn about what they do, I think you can have some amazing benefits from that, from putting in that time.
Definitely. Reps are huge. Just knowing
Reps
what
are huge.
questions to ask, and those mentors or people you reach out asking you questions, you know what to anticipate. And
Exactly.
I mean, I'm in my late 20s. I feel bad for the guys before me that didn't have LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's too easy nowadays. I mean, look
So
at
easy.
someone's profile, look up where they work because there's probably a profile there. Pick out one thing that you can share an interest with, and include that in a cold email. And
And if you can't
spread a
find,
wide net.
yeah, and if you can't find anything that's a common interest, then you could at least talk about how you're working toward a career in investment and whatever, investment management, investment banking, private equity, hedge funds, and you're really interested to learn more. And just if you're having these conversations when you're not actually asking for anything, when you're not trying to get an internship, especially when you already land an internship, it's even more powerful, because then you can say to them, actually, I already have an internship lined up for December, but I'm just really curious about, your role and what you do. Therefore, there's like, it takes it off the table that you're trying to get something. And understand, people sometimes just wait till when they need something to network, and
Exactly.
it's almost too late.
Do you research, find what specifically you want to do? Because if you just reach out and say, "Oh, I'm interested in investment banking," that doesn't really do much. But if you find someone that's in an industry, within investment banking or whatever it is, find something specific. I mean, people love to talk about themselves and focus on that. I mean,
Yep.
I've had calls, industries that I'm potentially interested in years down the road, and I've kind of looked up experts in the industry, and I have a great job now, but I've called them up and just asked them to tell me more about what they do. And people are so willing to do that. So definitely encourage people to just reach out, whether they have a purpose or not.
Because I think intellectual curiosity oftentimes is a great measure of somebody will be a good employee. So when they hear you're curious and then you actually sound genuine on the phone, sometimes you end up sticking in their mind when a position comes up.
Yeah, who
You know?
knows? 2 years later, you could be
Exactly.
interviewing at that firm. So
Exactly. So, anyways, long rant there, but figured it was relevant since I just got that email. But anyways, Edmund Burke, thanks so much for taking the time to share your wisdom today with all the listeners.
Patrick, thanks for having me. It's been great.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.